very important session discussing Syrian security challenges right here on our northern borders. We're honored to be joined by our moderator, Yaakov Lapin, and panelists, Jonathan Spire and my dear friend and heroic woman, Rowan Osman. Please join me in welcoming our speakers, and Yaakov, go ahead.
Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us on this very, very important subject. It's great to see all of you here. Hello, Dr. Kedar, great to see you here as well. We were supposed to be also joined by Dr. Jack Naraya. He's an expert on Lebanon. Unfortunately, couldn't be with us today. We wish him well. I urge all of you to follow his writings as well. We are joined today, I'm very glad to say, by Jonathan Spire. He's an analyst, a writer, a journalist of Middle Eastern Affairs. He's director of research at the Middle East Forum, editor of Middle East Quarterly magazine, and a contributor to the Wall Street Journal, The Spectator magazine, Jewish Chronicle, and many other media outlets. Jonathan is also the author of Days of the Fall, a reporter's journey in Syria and Iraq wars, in the Syria and Iraq wars, I should say, based on his trips to Syria and Iraq, and he's also author of The Transforming Fire, The Rise of the Israel-Islamist Conflict. We're also honored to be joined by Raowan Osman. She is a Syrian-born German activist, writer, public speaker, advancing Arab-Israeli normalization and confronting anti-Semitism, very active in social media. I think it's almost impossible to miss your very important contributions. She holds the Moral Courage Award, the White Rose Society Award, and the Oppenheimer Medal, and serves as a visiting Research and Diplomacy Fellow at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. So, great to be with you. It's fantastic to have you both here. And ladies and gentlemen, Syria is once again in the headlines after it's been out of the headlines, but the reason is a little bit strange. We had a very bizarre recommendation, let's call it that, from President Trump, who suggested that the al-Shara regime would do a better job or a cleaner job of taking out Hezbollah in Lebanon than Israel. I don't think this audience requires any further clarifications on why none of that is true. But within this absurdity, there is also a reminder. The Assad regime was a central link in the Iranian Shiite axis. It fell after Hezbollah was devastated by Israel's offensive back in 2024, and Hezbollah was the supporting army that Iran sent to save the Assad regime. And so what that means is that Hezbollah did spend many years fighting al-Shara and his fellow Sunni rebels. Many of them are Islamists and jihadis. So basically we've got ongoing hostilities, even though they're not in an active conflict right now, between the Sunni Islamists of Syria and the Shiite Iranian-backed Islamists of Lebanon. And that hostility is very much still in place. So my first question to you, Jonathan, is do you think Syria will get involved in Lebanon at any time, not necessarily now, against Hezbollah? Do you think that this conflict will reignite at any time in the foreseeable future?
Thank you, Yaakov, and hello to everyone. Well, first of all, I would say that whilst one should never say never, this is not going to be happening anytime soon. I think I'm able to say with confidence. It's worth noting that President Ahmed Shara, Mohammed al-Jolani, as people here still call him, maybe rightly, has already himself ruled it out. So I think it was a fairly ludicrous suggestion, frankly, from the president from the beginning, and I don't think it's in danger of happening anytime soon. But whilst it may, cause us to find it even slightly amusing, this suggestion, there's some very serious aspects behind it, nevertheless, which I think we should bear in mind. Firstly, I think that the very fact that President Trump is making that suggestion indicates the influence behind him and behind some of his most senior advisors, and it is the influence of Turkey and Qatar. Let's say if you hear President Trump saying something like, well, Israel can't do it because they just knock buildings down and all this stuff, this is not something that he just thought of himself. It's what, and let me name names, because why not? It's what such individuals as Ambassador and Special Envoy Tom Barrett think, and it's what the Turks think, and it's a Turkish message. Now, once we get to that point, it's no longer a joke, ladies and gentlemen, because this element is something very, very serious. The Turkish involvement with the emergent Islamist Sunni regime in Syria and the ambitions that the Turkish government has for that regime is elements which we should be taking very, very seriously indeed. I won't go on and on, just give you one more couple of sentences to remember. And I suggest that we do remember that the victory of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham in Syria would have been impossible without the presence of Turkey in its enclave that it kept stubbornly and, as it turns out, presciently in the northwest of the country. When everyone else was saying the war was over and the Emirates and others were reopening their embassies in Damascus, everyone held on to that enclave. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is not a puppet or a proxy of the Turks, but their victory and their march to Damascus would have been impossible without the Turkish presence. And Turkey is going to cash in those IOUs, and it is doing so. Which means that the suggestion of intervention in Lebanon, while on the face of it not particularly serious, and I don't think it's serious in the immediate future, contains within it some very, very serious aspects which we would do well to look at very seriously with regard to the direction of events in Syria.
Thank you very much for that answer, Jonathan. And Rawan, picking up from where Jonathan left off, you lived in Lebanon for 18 years under Hezbollah's shadow. You watched the Assad regime fall from Germany. And actually, I wanted to ask, first of all, about the Syrian army, because we know that it contains many Islamists and jihadists. Some of them are exactly these same rebel forces that Jonathan was talking about, and they just sort of put on Syrian army uniforms, but they even retain the same command structures. So I wanted to ask you, what do you observe as happening in Syria right now from the army's perspective, from the regime's perspective? What kind of country is forming on our northern border? Where do you see this project going?
Thank you. I beg to differ with what's been said. As someone who has lived in 4 different Arab countries, and I've been to Lebanon and Syria when these seismic changes were happening, and this is my opinion, I think that without Israel weakening Hezbollah, al-Shara or al-Julani would have never been able to be successful in toppling Assad. However, as soon as a ceasefire was signed between Israel and Hezbollah, the rebels/jihadists mobilized from Idlib, and within 11 days, they took over Damascus. I do not think that the Israelis were incapable of stopping them, and yet they haven't. So I believe that there was a green light from the Americans and possibly from the Israelis. And what the Israelis have done is destroy the military infrastructure as soon as al-Julani and his forces took over. Am I concerned? Yes. Was Assad better than al-Julani? Absolutely not. And anyone who says this hasn't got the slightest idea of what monstrosity, of the pain 5 decades of Assad regime has inflicted on people. I give you a very simple example. Couples would not discuss the president in their own kitchen. People were petrified. It was an Orwellian reality in Syria. So we are comparing al-Julani not to Angela Merkel, but we're comparing al-Julani to Assad. And as you mentioned, the passage, the corridor between Iran and Iraq, Hashd al-Shabi and Hezbollah, is closed, so what happened is positive. Am I happy that neo-jihadists took over in Syria? No. We have thousands unleashed on our borders. And I say our borders because my priority is Israel and everything Israel represents in our region. Israel is our hope. I think there was a green light, and I do not think that President Trump's statement is so absurd because it terrifies the Lebanese, including Hezbollah. They know that they shot themselves in the foot when they joined Assad and helped him kill tens of thousands of Sunnis in Syria, and they have a debt to pay. Is al-Julani interested in sending his boys into Lebanon? Absolutely not. Is he more capable than Israel? Absolutely not. Is he scarier? Definitely. He is willing, and he signaled, he's willing to handle Hezbollah to stop them from infiltrating Syrian borders, but beyond that, he's incapable. And while the IDF is pushing Hezbollah further north, where are they going to go? Except to Syria and hopefully from there to Iraq and to Iran. And bear in mind, we have enough problems. We still have Hashd al-Sha'bi on the other side of the Syrian borders. He's willing to keep his area under control. Is he capable? What happened to the Druze, to the Alawites, to the Christians, and to the Kurds? And I'm going to end with one sentence. When the jihadists were slaughtering the Kurds 2 months ago, I went to Erbil, Iraq, and I spoke to Kurds who were very, very upset with what happened to their families in Syria. But they said, their understanding is that Ajulani was allowed to take over because he's supposed to handle Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hashd al-Sha'bi in Iraq. And the way things are unfolding confirm, in my opinion, my analysis of what's happening at the moment.
Thank you very much for that, Rowan. And Hashd al-Sha'bi, just for the reference, is the umbrella group of Iranian-backed, mostly Iranian-backed Shia militias in Iraq. Now, you touched on the minorities in Syria, the massacre of the Druze, and Jonathan, I wanted to come back to you on this. Tell us what you see regarding how minorities are faring in the new Syria. We've got the Druze, we've got the Kurds, we've got the Alawites, who were basically running the regime through Assad before his fall, and all of these minorities now seem to be in varying degrees of trouble, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better for them as time goes by, because it seems like the West and the United States don't really seem to care at all about their welfare. So how do you view their situation, and do you think that there's an opportunity here for Israel to help them?
Yeah, first of all, the minorities are doing very badly in Syria. This will not surprise anybody, and it shouldn't surprise any of us, because we, after all, are no longer strangers to Sunni Islamist and jihadi governance in our region.